Welcome back to the Samurai Brothers, episode 19 of our podcast. And I hope you're all having a great 4th of July weekend. And appreciate all the veterans and people serving in our military and law enforcement who do a great job of, putting their lives on the line and making sure that this country is secure and safe. So we salute those who have done that for us, and just for everything that goes on in this country right now. Pretty crazy, but that we can have the freedom to say what we say. So with that being said, Matthew, it was great seeing you and the family over the weekend and stuff. So we had some fun times there. And Matthew, we got a really action-packed episode today. I mean,
we have a lot going on.
There's a lot to go on. So I'll just really quick preview what we've got going on. So you watched it obviously live. So UFC 276, we had that going on. As people might be able to see from the screen, the UFC announced their 2022 Hall of Fame. And so we'll go over who made it in. As you can see, Khabib is one of the inductees, and then some. When we'll get into some more stuff later, which is crazy conference alignment. We'll let you know which schools have jumped ship from their current conference and which conference that they are heading off to. So, and how that might affect, obviously, basketball and football is a big thing with these schools, but could it affect wrestling in some way? So, a discussion that me and Matthew will be having. And we'll also look into some wrestling real quick. Some people that we know of that have gone in and gone to the Asian Championships. And lastly, this is the last week before the Sumo Nagoya Basho 2022 is going to start. So we'll do a little bit of coverage about that. So Matthew, let's get right into it. So actually, let me go really quick to UFC 276. So Matthew, we'll go over the early prelims. You said that you had been able to watch it. So just kind of, go do a quick review of what happened. So it looks like these were the three matches. First, I think in order, it would have been Jessica Rose Clark versus Julia
Stoliarenko.
That would have been the first fight, correct?
Yeah, I believe that's how it's pronounced. That is either the second fastest or no. It is the second fastest submission in UFC women's bantamweight history. The first is still owned by Ronda Rousey. But yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna mark that down as a potential comeback of the month candidate, because when I do the for MMA Freak, when I do the fighter of the fights of the month. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Jessica Rose Clark, who is an Aussie, she early in the fight, as short as it lasted, she nailed Julia, mm-hmm. who I can't remember if she's German or Lithuanian. I'd like to say Lithuanian, but yeah, she's Lithuanian. Yeah, she got nailed. She did one of those drops and then got back up on the cage and then was able to come back and get the takedown, and they rolled around and grappled, and she got the arm bar.
So
and
just so our audiences know, can you which is which, so that so the one on the left would be which one? That would be Julia Stoliarenko. Is that correct? On the
left.
Yes. Correct?
On the left of what? I'm not seeing any pictures or video. Oh. What are you pointing out?
Oh, sorry. Well, it might help if I screen share.
Yes, it might help if you screen share.
Okay, so Matt, can you see this now?
Oh, yeah, Rose Clark. Oh, so she was the underdog.
Yes. So Rose Clark. So she would be the one on the right.
Yes. So the tatted one on MMA forums. Got a lot of guys like her because of her tattoos. But yeah, Rose Clark is on the left, and she was the favorite, and she was going up against Julia Stoliarenko. So I can't remember exactly what background Jessica Rose Clark came from. I'd like to say that she was brought in directly into the UFC. Stoliarenko did a stint on one of the Ultimate Fighter series before it went on hiatus. So
yes, obviously this 42-second submission ended up earning the fight performance of the night.
One of the three, yeah.
One of the three. And yes, so as we were talking earlier, because they only used to do two performance of the nights, but it looks like it got
it's varied depending on what all happens on the card.
And then obviously you have a fight of the night.
Yeah.
And but I guess much to the chagrin a bit of Stoliarenko. I mean, she got some. Now, performance of the night, does that only go to the winner?
Yeah, that only goes to the winner.
Yeah. So, anyway.
You mean much to the chagrin of Clark?
Yes. So, anyway.
And then up above, Macy Barber, I would still qualify her as an up-and-comer. But I would argue that this was her biggest fight today because Jessica Ai at one point challenged Valentina Shevchenko for the women's flyweight title.
Now, if I remember correctly, isn't Jessica Ai the one that got her ear exploded? Or was that someone else?
You know, she was in that fight. She was the one who exploded the ear. Leslie Smith was the one whose ear exploded.
Oh, okay. Now
I've actually seen Leslie Smith since that fight, and I got to see that ear. It's like,
did she have to get reconstructive surgery on that?
It's like barely it barely resembles an ear.
So
it looks like it doesn't just look like a cauliflower because it was the reason why I was that puffy was because the cauliflower ear was still freshly filled with liquid. So I hits it just right and it goes, yeah, it literally explodes.
Now, did Jessica Ai not, or I think probably the other place I know Jessica Ai from did she go challenge Ronda Rousey once?
No, she was fighting as a bantamweight at the time, but she never got around to getting to far enough up there before Holly knocked out Ronda.
Okay. So as you're
saying, then Amanda knocked out Ronda, and Ronda's in the WWE now. So
Macy Barber was the winner of this fight.
I should note that both for MMA Freak and for several other publications, a few years ago, Macy Barber got the Outbreak Fighter of the Year award. Because she just went on a tear, which I think included some of her early UFC fights. She went undefeated, like won 3 or 4 fights in 1 year. So but then she got injured, and she's still young. I think she's in her early 20s, which is.
So then she took out a veteran, I guess, so to speak.
Well, yeah, like I said, Jessica Ai challenged Valentina Shevchenko for the flyweight title, That's probably another thing that she's known for, is that she got you know how some fighters, when they get knocked out, that it's like two things happens when a fighter gets knocked out. They either go limp and they just, or they stiffen up and go they look like a dummy. Jessica I was the latter. That's because Valentina hit her right on her kick, landed her right on like around the like right around the temple area, so the side of the head, and she just fell backwards, arms and legs stiff, definitely. And she's like, you could tell that it's like she was in that like mode of like just her brain's controlling her breathing, because she's just that like everything stiffened up.
So what is up possibly for Macy Barber going? So like, does she have
one or two other contender fights, I'd imagine? I mean, if she fights one or two more good fights, she could be challenging Valentina. I would imagine probably not by the end of the year, but probably by like the early next year. I would say first quarter. If she wins two or more good fights, because she might. I mean, this is, like I said, as far as I can tell, this is her biggest win yet, but she may not win her next fight. So, but like I said, she's still an up and comer. She's in her early 20s, so she's still young.
Ways to go. So let's move on then to the next fight. Now, I remember Uriah Hall, and
yes, he's known for the most devastating Ultimate Fighter knockout, where again something similar.
But it looks like he was not able to get the win this time, as it was a unanimous decision to Andre Muniz. So, Matthew, walk us through that one. Was it Muniz had control of the fight? Or
Muniz had control. Muniz had control of the fight. Part of the problem with Uriah Hall is and Dana White said this before, it's like he did very well in the Ultimate Fighter, but then when he went to the finale, he choked. So the argument is that he's got some kind of mental. He's basically a gym.
Got a chip on his shoulder.
He's a gym warrior, essentially, where he could do well in the gym just fine, but then when he actually gets out there, he might perform, he might not.
There's a saying. I think I've heard it a few times by some people. When you're in the wrestling room, you do really great in the wrestling room, and you might be beating people that are really good in the wrestling room, but then you go out actually onto the mat and you choke, and they will reference you as an All-American in the room, meaning that, hey, you might be going in, and this has happened a few times with, like, I've seen it with if you go to the Santa Ana College wrestling practices and stuff, and there'll be some really good people. They'll be beating, like, maybe some returning state placers, All-Americans and stuff, and they'll be beating them. But then either they go out onto the mat and they don't perform, or they just don't go out at all. And the old saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So. Yeah, the whole All-American in the room thing. So this would probably be the equivalent of what you were saying, a gym warrior. Yeah,
he could be the best guy in the gym and just not be able to perform.
Well, so what do we see going forward for both fighters? Like, is Andre on a winning streak? Is he where would he be ranked right now?
He's an up and comer. I think he's on a 2-3 fight winning streak, so he's building himself up. I think it's got to be a while though before he faces Israel Adesanya, or Izzy as he goes by. Hall is back to the drawing board.
His what?
Hall is back to the drawing board. I think he was coming off. I think he had a win, but back to the drawing board. I don't want to call him a gatekeeper just yet, but he's kind of fallen into that mold.
What are they? What I don't remember what
Gatekeepers,
it's called.
the gatekeeper in MMA is similar to the journeyman in boxing. They have winning records.
If they call it stocks or something, but like his stock might be dropping. I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but
that's a pretty accurate term.
Yeah, when you've got let's say like when players are thinking about from college if they want to enter the draft, and then something happens to the team, and I don't know if this is the correct reference, but like their stock drops, meaning that they're not marketable.
Well, it normally doesn't happen to the team; it happens more to the individual. But yeah,
true. Like
his stock's been going up and down, up and down, up and down. Where it's looked like it's there's been times where there's been times in the UFC where he's looked like he could do really well, but the problem is he's not consistent mentally. He's got the physical skill perfectly. Mm-hmm. If he was 100% up here, 100% of the time, he'd be champion by now. I could see that.
You see that happen. I mean, any sport, you'll see that happen. Wrestling is a very good example of that. Like MMA, you got some wrestlers. They're really good. They could be, like high school state champions. They could be national, collegiate, national champions.
Oh yeah, we've seen our share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, okay.
We even saw some promising guys on the D1 level, and
yeah. All right, so let's go into the prelims.
That was prelims.
So let me see here. We'll start off with the first prelim, which was Brad Tavares versus Dricus du Plessis. I think if I announced that correctly. So anything that really stood out to you about this fight at all?
Tavares is the definition of a gatekeeper. He was in one of the teen season Ultimate Fighter, so he's been around for a while. He's just done enough to stay in the UFC.
And how about
they could have justified letting him go a while back, but he's been able to stay in there. Du Plessis is a new guy. So
I can see that.
Yeah, he's
not much.
So yeah, he went in there and got it done, and he was, his stock is rising.
Yeah. So then we'll go on to the second prelim fight, which was Ian Gary versus Gabriel Green. Now, I've never seen either of these two, so I mean,
I don't know if I saw either of these guys either. This might be the first time that I saw them, but it was definitely a good. It was not. I wouldn't call it a snoozer. It wasn't the most exciting fight though, but yeah, Gary was able to go in there and control Green the 3 rounds.
So was this more of a takedown riding fight?
This was more of like a stand up, like sometimes clinching on
Gary.
Up on the
Gary
cage.
was able to push more, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was able to control more, able to get some of the better combos in.
So here's two guys.
This was a fight.
Okay. Yes. So
These guys
don't remember too much.
Both veterans, late 30s, been around.
Yes, I do remember the names well, especially Cowboy Cerrone, but I do recall Jim Miller. Maybe 1 or 2 fights that when we would go out together. But I definitely remember Cerrone, Cowboy Cerrone. So yeah, it looks like this was a second round submission. So
this was a rematch, I should note, and Miller was able to avenge that first loss.
Okay. So this was
Also of note, the winner of this fight became the winningest fighter in UFC history.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
so
I know that
walk us through that, Matthew.
Yeah. I forget how many fights they both have, but they just both have a lot of fights. These guys have just been in the UFC for a long time. They've been in their ups and downs, but they're always able to go in there, win at least a few fights, get a bunch of wins, get finishes. I forget which one has the Miller might hold the win bonus record now.
Well, gee, I mean, maybe they could have stuck this on the main card.
I would have argued that they should have put this on the pay-per-view. This was one of those fights where unfortunately they were trying to anchor the prelims that are on ESPN with some decent fighters, so that's what they went with. And
yes, so he's I'm looking up his Wikipedia right now. So most bouts in UFC history, most wins in UFC history now, and most wins obviously in the lightweight division. So he's got cross divisional. Does he have cross divisional victories?
He does have cross divisional victories. Cowboys bounced up and down between lightweight and welterweight. Of note, he's I think he might actually be
so
I can't remember which division. It might be both, but he's one of the few fighters in the UFC to never miss weight. Regardless of what weight class he was at, he always made weight. Always.
So I've noticed Wikipedia doesn't really mark what it only has his total record, doesn't really break it down by UFC. So we'll have to go back to that unless we can somehow. No,
I mean, go to the bottom on his Wikipedia page. Go to the bottom and it has his accomplishments. Not that page. Go to the Wikipedia page and go to the bottom of the under his record.
Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah. So that was his 40th fight in UFC history. So that's quite a few. That's quite a number to have been able to fight 40 times in the UFC. Because I remember, back when you and I would go watch, and hey, if fighters like even went on a 2-match win streak, they'd be cut by Dana White or something. Depending on if they did really.
You mean
horrible.
2-fight losing streak?
Yes. I think I remember, seeing some of that. But okay, so yes, most wins in UFC history, which is 24. So, I mean, just the fact that even some of the champions, like in when you talk about like long reigning champions like Anderson Silva, Mighty Mouse, the fact that these guys don't even have that many wins in the UFC, I guess would be a testament, I guess, to just Miller's longevity, obviously. I'm trying to see if he's got. So he's never. I don't see it here. He's never been a champion in the.
Never been a champion. I can't remember if he's actually challenged for the title in the UFC, but yeah, I never was champion.
And he does have the most wins in UFC lightweight history, which is 21. He also has second most finishes in UFC history, which, ironically, he is tied. That this submission here tied him with Cowboy Cerrone.
Cerrone. It's pronounced Cerrone.
Cerrone? Okay. So he tied with Cerrone by finishing off Cerrone. So that.
Well, what was really bittersweet about it, afterwards, Cerrone retired.
No, so this was it for him, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's got 2 grown boys. He's got his own gym that he trains guys out of. He's got a ranch that he, also does things off of. He's getting into acting now. So he just doesn't really need to keep doing this. And, he's taking some shots. So it's like, at this point, he doesn't really need to keep doing it anymore. So it's yeah. Well, he did something that was very unique. Because, like I said, a lot of retiring fighters, they'll take their gloves off and they'll put it in the octagon. He took his gloves off and put them in his cowboy hat in the octagon.
Well, best of, All the
It was
best.
It was kind of reminiscent of Undertaker's retirement, where he left his jacket and his hat.
You know what? A lot of fans had a gripe with the WWE about when Undertaker did his retirement in the ring. And have you seen the clip where they did it, and then the ghost, quote unquote, of Paul Bearer comes up, right? And they had the audience cheering and stuff. Well, that was not a live audience. And a lot of people, I remember a lot of fans commenting about that, how that really took away from, they really should have had a live audience there when Undertaker retired, because if they had, because when Paul Bearer came up, I think the pop, which is, when the audience really goes off and cheers, like if you go back and watch old Attitude Era videos, and how you hear the glass breaking, because that's when Stone Cold's theme song is about to start. And I don't know if you've seen a couple of those clips, but the audience really goes off, when they hear the glass breaking. And they really should have, and so that's why a lot of people I've seen comments said that they really should have had a live audience for when Undertaker did his retirement and Paul Bearer showed up, because just imagine the pop that they would have got if the audience had been live. They would have really cheered on, because this was a lot of people's childhoods, So it is what it is. So
WWE's not exactly going, it's
yeah.
They're in this, like I said, AEW popping up is probably going to be good for the industry, because it's actually going to force WWE to start working at it. They've kind of already have.
Yeah, you could say WWE did get complacent, because they controlled the scene for a number of years, especially when they bought out,
They had,
WCW.
let's just say 15 years. They've had like 15 years of unchallenged dominance over the industry. So a lot of people have been saying it's good that AEW is coming in and is kind of challenging them. And of course, like I've said in past episodes, it's a good thing that AEW is doing something different. They're not trying to match WWE in their own style, which was a problem that WCW did, which worked for a little bit, but then they.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you just had a whole lot of problems with how WCW was running, whereas that's not how AEW is running, and AEW is doing stuff a lot smarter. They're running the promotion differently.
All right, so I wish Cerrone the best. Obviously, he's had some interesting fights, and I got to see quite a few of them with you, so let's hope he has a good journey going forward. And I guess we'll probably continue to see Miller breaking and extending some records, right? I mean, he's got fights on his contract still, correct?
Yeah, he's probably the type of guy who will probably retire when Dana White allows him to.
All right. So we have another performance of the night, which was Brad Riddle versus Jalen Turner, and this was pretty fast submission, so 45 seconds. And so what happened here, Matthew?
Let's see. If I recall this one correctly, this was the fight where I'd like to say that was. Yeah, that was that submission. That was a quick submission. They went in there, and Jalen Turner, I think he got some hard shots in, and then Riddle went down, and he got the hard submission in to the point where and he did so fast that I think he got Riddle's arm trapped in there, and Riddle had to do this he couldn't even like pull his arm out and try tapping. He had to do this weak like tap here because the way a guillotine is that they have their they have the arm and the head and arm trapped, and his arm was trapped in there, so he could only do this like tapping in here. Fortunately, the ref was able to see it, good ref, and was able to, you know, at that point, it was a quick, you know, knock him out, or knock him down, quick guillotine submission, using the strikes to set up the submission. Really, it was on ABC. Huh.
So our main card. So let's go right through. So first fight we had on the main card: Pedro Munoz versus Sean O'Malley. So
I would say Sean O'Malley was winning the fight up until the accidental eye poke. The fact of the matter is, with these types of gloves, with the open hand gloves, it's gonna happen.
Oh, so it was ruled a no contest because of an eye poke.
Yeah, it was ruled a no contest. You could tell O'Malley wasn't intentionally trying to, you know, gouge his eyes or anything like that. He just, it was one of those things where he was backpedaling, and, you know, unfortunately, when you're backpedaling, your basic instinct is to, you know, put your hands out. He did that, and he accidentally nailed Munoz in the eye, and Munoz couldn't continue.
One of the things that kind of makes me cringe sometimes when I watch some of these fights, it's like,
you know, something really interesting. Pride had a very low percentage of eye pokes, and a lot of people said it's because of how their gloves were designed. The UFC gloves are designed to where you could actually extend your hands fully out.
Mm-hmm.
But the Pride gloves were, and a lot of the Japanese MMA promotions, their gloves were designed with a natural curve.
Mm-hmm.
So
it wouldn't really. So
the argument there is that because they couldn't extend their fingers out fully, which why would you even need to? Let's face it, when you're throwing a punch or whether you're going in for takedown or grappling or anything like that, you don't really need your hand fully extended.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, there was just a much lower percentage of eye pokes. And there's actually been a MMA glove manufacturer that approached Dana White and said, look, we have these gloves. These are patented. They're curved inside. They've got very good padding. But the problem, the UFC likes to own everything that they use. So they basically said, we'll buy the patent off of you. And the guy was like,
I bet you that manufacturer told Dana White to go pound sand, right?
Yeah, he was like, I'm offering help with these gloves, and you're not going to use it because you don't own the patent. So we're still getting stuff like this because Dana White, being this, you know, the stubborn,
trying to be the businessman, but not really the smartest of business acumens or the business strategies. And, you know, sometimes, hey, you know,
he's been smart enough to get the UFC as far as it has, but it's one of those
you know, and he'll continue to take it where it's going to go. You know, this is just a blip, you know, for him. And I mean, unless something egregious were to happen in the UFC that's scandalous enough to knock him out, which, believe me, the way things have been going and the way I hear things,
if he can survive all the fallout that happened with with throwing out Ariel Helwani, it's like that. There's like something that you don't. There's some things you don't do in sports journalism, and that's mess with the journalists, which Ariel did not. As far as we can tell, he didn't break any rules, but Dana White threw him out and said, you're done. And then because of the backlash, he had to backpedal.
So you might need since I'm not too familiar with the story, is it okay if I ask you to kind of explain to our audience?
UFC 199, right before the right before IME bought out Zuffa. And it was UFC 200 was coming up that July.
Mm-hmm.
No one knew that Brock Lesnar was going to be on that fight card, and I didn't know it because I'm not in the habit of checking my Twitter during the fights.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually see the trailer and I'm genuinely surprised because, like I said, I'm not in the habit of checking my Twitter during the fights.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Ariel Helwani, who at one point was with ESPN, he's back with MMA fighting now. He's been like the most long-term MMA journalist. He's one of the more well-known names. He finds out about it, reports it, and
so he breaks the story basically.
he breaks the story early. And Dana White, my understanding was it was more because the Fertittas were still in charge. My understanding is the Fertittas were the ones who were pissed, and they might have given the marching orders to Dana White. But the way that Dana White reacted, it sounded like he probably was. If they gave him the order, he probably didn't contend with it. So, they throw out not only Ariel, who's doing all the writing and reporting,
Mm-hmm.
they also throw out his camera woman, who she's a big name in and of its. Why in the world am I drawing a blank on her name?
Oh, you'll remember it.
Anyways, they throw her. They're
basically throwing out the whole crew. Basically.
Yeah, they threw out the whole crew. Like there was like another guy, a third guy in there as well. They threw the entire crew. They basically said you're done. So that Monday, Ariel goes onto his podcast, gives his side of the story. And again, Dana White kind of didn't agree with it because Ariel kind of got a little emotional towards the end, which you and I know very well. It's like sometimes not all guys are macho machismo, like hold it in, like rah type guys. Some guys are gonna get emotional. And not like weak beta male guys. We're talking just an everyday man.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, the public backlash was just so great in the journalism community because initially they were saying it was Ariel's ban was going to be a lifetime ban, but after that, he didn't break any rules. He didn't break any ethics rules. He didn't break any procedural rules. He found out about something and he reported it. And the only thing that he did wrong was anger Dana White, because Dana had this whole thing, and a lot of people didn't really. A lot of people didn't know.
Well, yeah, of course. So you find something out, and I'm very sure he corroborated the sources and all that. Correct?
Yeah, and he was right.
Yeah, so he was he.
So the only thing he did wrong was piss Dana White off. That's the only thing he did wrong.
He spoiled Dana White, surprising the world.
And as a result, he got thrown out. But then, yeah, because of the public backlash, they reversed the decision. So Ariel still goes to UFC fights now.
I bet does Dana take any questions from him?
What?
Does Dana take any questions from him?
On occasion.
Yeah, I know you've had your fair share of when you tried to be media, and I remember we had that one guy who I won't name names, but got you when I've been coaching with SAC Wrestling, and you were part of the SAC the Don's newspaper, and then he got you the El Don, and then he got you
removed from covering
wrestling because he cited, quote unquote conflict of interest, and that's as far as I'll go on that particular topic. I mean,
we'll just say that guy's not there anymore.
Anyway, so that's an interesting story, and of course, I mean, Dana said a lot of things that I don't agree with, and there's things that hey, I'm glad he takes certain stances on stuff, and so he's kind of you love him and you hate him at the same time, sort of thing. But yeah,
he's the
like
embodiment of a angry Bostonian Irishman, is the best way to put it.
Well, again, like you're saying, if he can survive that type of scandal, he can survive anything. We'll be seeing Dana White for.
Well, so here's the thing. He's never been caught up in he's never done anything illegal per se. A lot of people have said, have a lot of fighters have said, oh, he's been doing, because there's still that antitrust lawsuit that's going through the courts right now that was filed, and but the insinuation there is that he might have done some stuff illegal with contract law or something like that. Now, the thing is, that's more like a gray area. There's not a firm black and white line because contract law is changing all the time.
Of course.
So there's some. It's he's dipped into some gray area, but he's never gotten into anything illegal. He's never, let's point one example: the WWE steroids trial. He's always disavowed the use of steroids. There's been no proof that There's been no proof that he's encouraged any steroid use. There's been no proof that he's concretely covered up steroid use. There's been some possibility.
Yeah, but if there's been fighters that have tested positive, he's taken
action. Yes.
To the point of releasing them from the UFC.
Yeah. And then just on other stuff, it's he himself has not been involved in drugs. He's never been involved in any other illegal business practices. Especially when people were when Anderson Silva got knocked out by Chris Weidman, people were saying, "Oh, he threw the fight; it's fixed." It's and Sports Illustrated had a panel where they're saying, "Oh, MMA is less regulated." It's do you people realize that MMA is regulated by the same commissions that do boxing?
Yeah, and
when he was invited,
there wants to talk about the regulation of MMA versus boxing. I mean, and it doesn't take an expert to know the corruption that goes on, the rigging that goes on in boxing. It's just beyond, and people wonder why they're not gonna trust mainstream media for a lot of this crap that they pull out, especially when it comes to sports and stuff. It's because they're rehashing the same things, and yeah, I'd trust how the UFC runs things versus a lot of these boxing organizations.
Yeah,
and they're regulated by the same bodies that regulate boxing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's it's with some things with Dana White, it's there's been arguments that he's been straight out lying, because you have to agree with some of the promotional stuff, for example, that Brock Lesnar fight. These deals, it's some of these fight deals and some of these other deals that have happened, it's that these have been in place for months. So when Dana White just straight up says it's not going to happen, or he says some other stuff with regards to some other fighter contract negotiations or whatever, it's when it comes to that, he might be crossing into the straight up lying area.
Well, you know what I've always been amazed about? Unless you're a really, really big name draw, and people will use this a lot to try to justify that. I think especially when it came to the UFC pay and stuff, how even UFC fighters make less than up and coming boxers. and things like that. So, you know, it's really the bigger name people that are going to get the, you know, more of the paydays on the fight cards and stuff. And I think it's probably just something about the fact that it's the prestige and the name that is going to make a lot of these fighters, you know, wanting to get onto that level because of the name recognition.
Well, one thing also to remember, the top guys in the UFC are going to be making less than the top guys in boxing. Like you're not going to be seeing these like what did Floyd Mayweather make in his last fight?
Floyd Mayweather has the draw and the power to get an 8-figure payday on a fight.
Yeah, so that's Floyd Mayweather. But one thing that people have to remember is that when it comes to the UFC, yeah, the top guys are probably making a few million. They're not making these giant like $80 million paydays or whatever it is when it comes to the you know, the Mayweather fights. But you have to remember the UFC has something that most fight industries do not, and that's a fighting middle class. You see these fighters, the average fighter in the UFC probably makes about 6 digits a year. They fight 2, 3, 4 times, they're gonna make 6 digits.
Well, and don't they receive other benefits from being in the UFC also?
Oh yeah, like they like these the sponsorships. For example,
yeah, so right now, get sponsorships.
Yeah, well, it's not how it used to be. Because you know it used to be that you bring your own fight, which still works in other promotions, but they do get the I think they get a bigger cut from, ironically enough, from the Venom kits than they do from the Reebok kits. The Reebok kits were just the Reebok deal was just all over the place because you went with a General Sports gear manufacturer who didn't understand the sport, and then all of a sudden they're going with Venom. Venom's been in the deal since forever. They started as MMA
Venom deals with I see how a lot of wrestling teams, you know, high school wrestling teams out here will get like Venom deals and stuff too.
Yeah,
you know, so they'll have Venom gear and stuff. So
yeah, so Venom knew how it actually worked. So the guys from Venom, they got so the guys get more of a cut from Venom. They get these bonuses, and I don't know if you noticed, but there's now a general audience crypto.com bonus. With crypto going down, I wonder if they're going to try to get out of that deal.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, Matthew, we've we've gone on quite a tangent here, so let's try to get this all finished up here, really quick then.
So Sean O'Malley was winning the fight until he accidentally, the accidental thing with Pedro Munoz.
All right, so fight of the night, and Robbie Lawler. I have not seen or heard about Robbie Lawler in a while personally. I'm sure you've been following him. So
he's been around.
So a TKO over Brian Barberena. So
nope, that's Brian Barberena.
Pretty much in charge of this fight, Matthew.
No, just to confirm, that's Brian Barberena who beat Robbie Lawler.
Oh, is that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I was getting that wrong.
Yeah. It was a back and forth fight. I'd like to say Robbie won the first round, but Brian, I don't know. It was a close fight because they were just going at it.
Well, what was the cataclysm of what ended this fight?
Well, Barberena, hit up. I'd like to say it was a right hook.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong. My memory's not remembering, but he rocked him, and then he went in and surged, and they called the fight.
All right. So
I can't remember if Robbie's on a winning or losing streak, right? Well, I
so
can't remember if he had to win or lose.
this was deemed fight of the night. So it
Yeah,
must have
because they went that quickly.
it was pretty intensive.
They'll a fight that ends early. They'll call it a fight of the night if it's intense enough.
Yeah, round
I've
2.
seen one-round fights get called fight of the night.
So it looks like this was 4:47 into the second round.
Yeah, it was close to the end of the round.
All right, so moving on to the third match on the main card, which was the third performance of the night. Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira, with Pereira getting the TKO at 2 minutes 36 seconds into the first round. So was this pretty intensive also, or was it one-sided, would you say?
This was pretty one-sided, especially considering that if I recall, I think this is the one where it looked like Strickland was out, but then he tried to get back up, and the ref had to kind of, calm him down.
Okay.
Because if a guy's flash knocked out, gets a flash knockout, he's gonna get up as well.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few of those. So, all right, well that's something. So now we'll go on to the co-main event and the main event, which was we had 2 championship bouts. So the featherweight title bout, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. And this was a unanimous decision, went the full 5 rounds. So, Matthew, what happened with this fight?
Volkanovski did the same thing he's done in the last 2 fights. He went out there and he controlled it. I don't necessarily agree that it was because all 3 judges scored it 50-45, which means all 5 rounds went to Volkanovski. I feel like Holloway might have taken the first, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's, and of course, usually in a fight that goes the distance, it's normally going to be favorable towards the incumbent. I think.
Well, of note is that this is their trilogy fight.
So it was split 1-1.
Nope. This is 3-0 for Volkanovski.
So what
he
did,
has
what
solidified
Holloway...
his hold on Holloway.
So Holloway probably won't get another chance at.
I've rarely seen.
I mean, well, let me ask this, because I've seen plenty of like rubber matches. This is actually the first time I'm hearing about a trilogy match where you've only had one person win all three matches.
Well, it doesn't normally happen.
Yeah, it doesn't normally happen. Now, are there any instances that you might be aware of where you've had the same 2 fighters fight more than 3 times?
Maybe outside of promotions, but definitely not in the UFC. It's not happened in the UFC.
So, I mean, again, does this mean that Holloway is probably done being able to challenge Volkanovski?
Probably.
Okay.
He's got 3 shots at him, and he's lost all 3 times. The closest he probably got was the second fight. There were some times when he had Volkanovski in trouble, but he didn't have Volkanovski in trouble at all in this fight. So
what number defense was this for Volkanovski? Quite a few. By your reaction, it's quite a few.
Yeah, he's been in charge for a while. This is defense number 4.
Okay. Interesting.
But he's only fought 3 guys in his whole defenses.
Okay. All right. Well,
he took the fight from Holloway. The second fight was a rematch. Then he fought Brian Ortega and the Korean Zombie.
The Korean Zombie.
And then this last fight was Holloway again.
All right. So let's move on to the main event, which was Israel Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier. So
to me about this fight, what was more entertaining than the fight itself, because I'm I'm gonna be honest. It was kind of a snoozer, but what was more entertaining than the fight itself was Adesanya's entrance, because the first thing you hear is you see some purple lighting, and then you hear a gong, gong, gong. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I think I might be.
But to solidify it, then they cut to Adesanya in a dark cowboy hat, black cowboy hat, holding an urn.
Oh gosh. But it wasn't that specific. It wasn't that specific entrance, though, was it? Boy,
I'm sorry, what?
Was it that specific entrance theme?
Yes, it was.
Oh gosh, so he was using Undertaker.
He was going full Undertaker. And not only that, when he got out to where the audience actually was, some smoke machines go off. So then the smoke is out.
So what is his nickname? Does he have a nickname? Does he use it, or is it just Izzy?
I think it's just Izzy. But
So
he's an entertainer, so I can understand why he would do something like this. It's International Fight Week, and he's the main event, so why not do something like this?
Well, I can't imagine the conversation you must have been having if he got to talk with The Undertaker or with WWE for that.
It's funny you talk about that. Vince McMahon was there.
Interesting.
Yes, they at one point when they were showing people in the audience, they showed Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, and Triple H.
I mean, I gotta wonder, maybe there is some kind of behind the scenes thing. It's like, can you imagine there must be. I mean, the fact that Brock Lesnar has been in and out of the UFC, into the WWE, and then back and forth, and he's not the only one who's been between the UFC and the WWE. I mean, you had some other crossovers. I think CM Punk was one who I don't know if he fought in the UFC or not, but he did MMA.
So here's how it worked. When they loaned him for UFC 200, he was actually under contract with WWE. So that was a behind the scenes. That was actually a behind the scenes work on it deal.
I mean, I gotta wonder if, maybe at some point in the future that they would actually officially partner to have something like that in the world.
Something very interesting that I read a while back. Apparently back when back during the late Attitude Era, Shane McMahon, seeing where the UFC was going, wanted to buy the promotion.
Now, can you
imagine that? This was pre-Zuffa era. UFC is bleeding money.
Right.
So he knew where it was going. So he was trying, but I think what happened was the money to that ended up going towards the WCW and ECW purchases. It also didn't help that they did the failure of the first XFL.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Vince McMahon did put a lot of. It's really unfortunate how it worked. How both times where he invested a lot of money into both seasons of it, and I mean, the second time that it failed wasn't really his fault.
Yeah, it was doing decently, but then we know it was spring 2020. So before the season could even finish, everything just went.
Yeah. So, well, that's interesting, and that might be an interesting topic if it were ever to come up, if the WWE and the UFC were to actually partner up. I can't imagine that the WWE would put a lot of their people onto the other side, but definitely the UFC, loaning their fighters, on the WWE side.
You know, something very interesting. There actually was a partnership between Bellator and what was at the time called TNA. It's now called Impact.
Oh, yeah, I remember TNA.
And at the time, it was the de facto number 2.
Right.
Yeah, so they had crossover with both Rampage and King Mo was around at the time. So they had some crossover between the two. Oh, Bobby Lashley, too.
Yeah, Bobby Lashley. And Bobby Lashley, NCAA wrestler.
NAIA.
Was it NAIA? I thought he was a...
Nope, never. He was not in the NCAA. He's a 3-time NAIA champion.
Huh. All right. Okay. Well, that concludes UFC 276. An interesting one.
Speaking of MMA, pro wrestling crossovers. While we're on the subject, something interesting I do want to mention. So WWE over the weekend, or was it late last week, signed 2 people. So the first one you're not gonna really care about, Logan Paul. He apparently has done stuff as a celebrity, but now they're actually signing him.
Well, he's definitely going to be a gimmick wrestler.
Yeah. The second one is now former Bellator MMA fighter Valerie Laredo.
Okay.
So her background was she was an up-and-comer in Bellator, but she had one of the higher Instagram followings. So, and then on top of that, she's apparently the first Cuban American to be signed by the WWE.
Interesting.
Now, I would imagine that they're probably going to be working on because she's a beautiful gal. She's a bombshell. There's no other way to put it. So I would imagine that they're probably gonna
yeah, she'll be a diva.
They've dropped that term. They don't call them divas anymore.
Oh, they don't?
They just call them women.
Oh.
They kind of realized that, you know what, it was not the diva era of WWE is gone. The women there now can actually wrestle or make it look convincing instead of, back in the diva era where they're essentially getting models and actresses who couldn't do anything.
Okay, well, let me see here. So, I guess then, well, that's interesting. So, interesting times ahead for the WWE, I guess. So let's get into...
Oh, so another thing, this is going to be the last thing. So, since we brought up boxing earlier, the California State Athletic Commission is going to make a proposal to extend their pension, their boxers' pension program to extend to MMA fighters.
Interesting.
So the way that it goes is that if a fighter fights X number of matches in the state of California, then when they hit 50, they're eligible for a pension.
Interesting. I wonder how it's calculated too, because
they mentioned the calculations. I wish I had the article, but that calculation is you have to be 50, you have to fight X number of rounds. They say you have to be scheduled X number of rounds. So what that means is from the time that the first bell rings to how many rounds you are scheduled to fight is how you're eligible.
Okay. All right. So let's get right into.
Yeah, just to finish that up, it has to. What happens is they will submit it to a committee in the California State Legislature, and it has to go through the legislature. I think that would be interesting because that would be the first actual retirement plan of any kind in MMA in the United States.
All right, let's get right into the UFC Hall of Fame. Matthew, 2022 class. So let's read up on this. So our 2022 class is going
Hall of Fame.
Let me see here. We are going to, let me see if I can find the list. I'm not sure how this is working specifically, but
let's see. Giga Chikadze was given the Knockout Cancer Foundation Award. That's just a charitable award.
Okay, so then our next one we've got is Cub Swanson.
Cub Swanson and Do Ho Choi. So what they do is they
fight wing. Okay.
Yeah, so the fight wing is basically when fight is a fight specifically is inducted into the Hall of Fame. So by default, the fighters of that fight are inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Which by default makes Shogun Rua and Dan Henderson members in the UFC Hall of Fame. And I can't remember if they're officially in yet as individuals.
So that earned Fight of the Year in 2016. So what exactly happened in that fight that earned them?
I think it was a Fight of the Year. They just went in and they banged.
Okay, that's interesting. So
that's the best way to put it.
Modern wing, so I think the modern wing is current UFC and the classic wing or
Pioneer wing?
The Pioneer wing, and I have to imagine that's pre-Zuffa or early Zuffa.
They include some early Zuffa.
Yeah. Okay. So modern wing had two. I think two inductees. First one is I think this is the big one, which is DC Daniel Cormier.
And I should note he only found out. I forget when they announced it, but they announced it earlier this year. He only found out when they were when they showed it on the broadcast. So they said, "Hey, DC, get over here." So they're showing him in a corner live as he, showing him that, and he got teary-eyed.
I'm very sure he did.
He wasn't expecting it.
Well, yeah. Obviously, heavyweight and light heavyweight, and he even held both titles at the same time for a period. So that is, obviously in and of itself quite something.
He was an exceptional fighter. We both know that he was an exceptional wrestler, like 3-time Olympian. Yeah, so this is well deserved.
And and then he gives it back. Head coach at Gilroy Wrestling. They're a consistent top 10 program in the CIF. I even had the chance to I think ref opposite him once at the 5 counties, and I even had to ask him to kind of clear the area, and his response. I didn't even say I know him or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm just being a ref because I'm having to do my ref duties, which is clear the mats so that people are not in the way, so that the audience can see the other mats. And his response was, "Oh yeah, I'm coaching over here and stuff." And I thought, well, I just need you to be, out of the way for other people to see. And I think he moved not long. I think he kind of stayed there for a bit, but he moved not long after that. So
well, that just goes to show his humility. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He was just like, yes. "Okay."
Yes. So I'll definitely.
Some guys let their fame go the head. Look at his contemporary John Jones. He's let it go to his head. Cormier never let the fame go to his head. He always remembered, in the end, I'm an everyday man who just had a very great opportunity and a very great run.
So definitely.
And now has a very good retirement job.
Very good. And then obviously, probably one of the few fighters to end undefeated. Matthew, you'll have to pronounce his last name, but Khabib.
Nurmagomedov.
So he's in the Hall of Fame. One of the few fighters I've seen here that has a undefeated record of
29-0.
And in fact, I think, did he wrestle too?
I think he did some wrestling, but that's not where he concentrated on. He did some wrestling. He did some sambo, but that's not where he I don't know if he ever made it to the world stage.
So obviously he decided to retire because of the passing of his father. But some big fights that he that he ended up winning and stuff.
He's actually in the promotion game now.
Yeah. Especially
unfortunately, he's been having some problems because Putin allowed him to get screwed over.
Yeah, not much you can do about that.
Because Khabib is doing business as a Russian promotion. So, the entire Western world hates Russia right now, which made it difficult. It's making it difficult for him to do business, unfortunately. But what you gonna do?
Yeah, what you gonna do? So, congratulations to all these fighters for getting in. So, we'll just have to see how things are gonna go from there. So, our last MMA topic of the day. Shout out to a guy that I know very well, who wrestled for Santa Ana College back in 2013 and 2014. He placed fourth both years that he wrestled. Very humble guy. Very good wrestler, and just an inspiration, especially for Coach Silva. When he would send me like pictures of seeing this wrestler going out, running on the track by himself. Even after a tournament, even after he'd do well or something, he'd go out there because you know what? He knew he needed to train. He knew he needed to get better. I really wish I could have seen him get into the finals. He lost a couple of tough matches, that just didn't allow him to get to the finals and possibly wrestle to be a state champion. But he's going out and he's making some noise. So this is Richie Miranda and just Matthew. I'll just get this up here real quick. So Richie Miranda, he was wrestling. I think Devin Dixon was his name, but as you can see here, he was able to get Dixon into a guillotine. This was at LFA. He obviously submitted him, and from what I was, this was the third round, and from what I was seeing about this fight specifically. This happened in April.
I remember Richie Miranda back when he was a little bit more clean cut.
Right. So El Machete 714. So make sure you all show him some love. Go and follow him. And but yeah, the kid was just phenomenal and a really great wrestler. I'm really glad to know him and glad to see that he's doing well and stuff. This was at the LFA event that happened in April, and I'm not playing the audio obviously because we don't want to get with the dreaded copyright strike. But one thing that apparently in this fight, Dixon was winning the fight according to the audio, and so Richie was really needing to do something in order to win this fight, and he got taken down, right at the beginning of the third period, but he was able to maneuver that into a guillotine for the win. So, and in fact, he stopped by the wrestling room a few weeks ago, just to do some practice and stuff. So, we'll have to see if he can eventually make it onto the UFC events. So great job to him.
Well, I would say that if he's not on the Dana White Contender Series this later in late summer, early fall, then he'll get there.
Yeah. So we'll transition right into wrestling real quick. Not too much going on right now. It's the off season somewhat. There are some things going on, some announcements back and forth, but I think just a quick thing because this is kind of a bit personal for me and Matthew. The UWW Asian Championships, the U15 category, there was a couple girls that wrestled that are really more connected to people that we know from when we were younger, when we were wrestling in like middle school, high school. So first girl wrestler that I want to bring up, her name was, she wrestled at the 66 kilos, Honda Yurina. So she's actually the daughter of Honda Takaki, I think is how its name is pronounced. And basically, he was a senpai wrestler of mine from my high school alma mater, which was Nichifuji.
Or upperclassmen is
right,
the best translation.
Basically, people who came in before you. And so she took second at the. She was representing the Figure 4 Club, and she was wrestling at 66 kilos. Now, Japan, the girls U15 team won the. They came in second because India really had a good showing that day at that tournament. But she took second, so congratulations to her, and congratulations to her dad, who's been coaching her. I've been following his, social media accounts and stuff. So the Figure 4 Club, which Matthew, they were the main sponsor of the Figure 4 tournament, which, as you know, they had a partnership with the Destroyer, who was a pro wrestler who went to Japan a lot and stuff. And I think, did you ever see him? I think, or was probably not then. I know he came to the tournament a couple times because we went to one of the tournaments and participated. But anyway, so then there was another.
We went to the Kiguchi.
It might have been the Kiguchi tournament. Yes, that's right, the Kiguchi tournament,
which had a submission wrestling category.
So and then the other girl who wrestled, who her father we know very well, Matthew. So this is Katsume Yua, or Yua Katsume is her name, and she's the daughter of Rikiya Katsume, who coached Shonan High School while you and I were over in Japan, and he's got quite a record too, as far as he won the high school inter-high tournament. He was also a winner of the All Japan Collegiate tournament, and he also was a veterans world champion too. He competed 6 or 7 years ago. So, but just so his daughter represented Nexus Team Yokosuka, which is,
I'm guessing that's a new.
Yes, it's a newer club in the Yokosuka area. I think Yokosuka Junior Wrestling Club is still around, but
we haven't seen. No, Zushi Kids is.
Yeah, Zushi Kids Wrestling Club too. But anyway, so because
Matsuoka-san is still doing it.
Actually, so he retired. So there's another coach that's doing it, but he Hiraoka is his name, but his son is currently wrestling at Isogo right now, and he took third last year at the national spring championship.
I remember Hiraoka-san.
Yeah, so his son Taiga is wrestling right now, And
I remember him. He was a little kid.
Yeah, he was a very little kid. Yes. And when I went back a few years ago, I got to wrestle around with him. But now, yeah, so he's in high school and he's dominant in his weight class as far as Kanagawa wrestling is concerned. And he took third at the Nationals. So, he's no joke when it comes to how
Well,
good.
that's what happens when you start them young and they stick with it.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations to Yua Katsume and her dad for, Asian champions. So it'll be interesting to see how they go.
Should we mention Katsume's intensity?
So yeah, well, he's a very passionate guy, and that's all I can really say about how intense he was. Very passionate, and sometimes it would even translate to some other teams too, so to speak. And I think one of the last matches that I wrestled in high school, I gut wrenched one of the Shonan wrestlers, and this guy was like a first or second year kid. But when I gut wrenched him, I don't know if he got into a bad position or something, but he ended up dislocating his shoulder, and I felt really bad, and so I was apologizing to Katsume Kochi, and but he said, don't worry about it.
that was his mentality.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think though, because I remember when he was first coaching, I think I don't think either his kids were really young or they weren't born yet. Because I think his son is wrestling for Hiryu High School right now. So I wonder if having kids kind of what?
Where's Hiryu?
Hiryu is in Shizuoka, which actually it's actually Katsume Kochi's alma mater high school.
Oh, okay.
So his son is wrestling in Shizuoka.
Is Katsume from Shizuoka?
Yes.
So when he was coaching Shonan, it was because he was stationed there.
Yes. I gotta imagine his son is probably staying with family. So that's that. So yeah, big shout out to the Honda father-daughter team, and then the Katsume father-daughter team. So a big shout out to them. And so Matthew, I know we went pretty long on the UFC thing, but let's get right into it, shall we? College conference realignment doesn't really have much to do with wrestling or MMA or whatever, but maybe in a way it does. Maybe we're just going to expand into college sports here and stuff, So let's get right into it, shall we? Everyone's probably heard about it over the weekend, but USC and UCLA made the shocking announcement to the world that they are leaving the Pac-12 conference, and they are packing their bags and going to the Big Ten. And it will start the academic year 2024. Their contract with the Pac-12 expires on June 30th, and their new contract will be set up and completed with the Big Ten starting in August 2024. Now, Matthew, we know that like our grandfather said, tradition be damned, basically, because this is what it's all about now. I mean, we saw that with the fact that Texas and Oklahoma were willing to leave the Big 12 in order to go to the SEC, and we know for a fact that.
Yeah, well, let's face it. The Big 12 is not that old. In fact, of the Power 5 and all the other major conferences, it's probably the youngest if you exclude, the big East American split, which it technically football-wise the
Well, and that this is
football-wise the American is the Big East. It's just under a different name.
Well, and we know for a fact that this is all about the football. This is all about the football money, and secondly, about the basketball money. And and like Dad had been mentioning, Pac-12, the money that the Pac-12 gives out to their teams is approximately about $37 million a year. But if they go to the Big Ten, then that number almost doubles because it's going to be approximately $54 million. So,
something we talked about, when we had our family discussions, but something that we talked about is the Big Ten network is a much bigger, broader, more successful college network. It's probably the only profitable network.
Well, and also the fact that, kind of getting into wrestling a bit, Big Ten Network on YouTube is probably the only one I've seen besides the Big 12. I'll have to go back and look at some of the other networks, but they're the only ones that will put like full wrestling duels, on YouTube.
I think the big, I think the EIWA will do some.
Yeah. Well, they have to because they're a wrestling conference. But, I think just, it is personally to me, this is kind of a turnoff of just how these conferences have to realign instead of, honoring tradition the way it is. And this is going to be, as a whole, crippling to the Pac-12 because what other names does the Pac-12 have if they, if they're losing USC and UCLA? I mean, that is the main draw.
Yeah, because let's face it, UCLA and USC, though obviously UCLA known for basketball and UCLA known for basketball and USC known for football, even though they're not exactly there, they're still big names in terms of those sports, and they're big names in general. Like, I think even compared to like the Ivy Leagues, the hardest school to get into the hardest college to get into in the United States is UCLA.
That's because it's the most applied to.
Yeah. So everyone wants to go there. It's like everyone. It's like if they'd had wrestling, I would have wanted to go there. I wouldn't have gone in because I didn't have the academics, but I would have wanted to try to go there. Everyone wants to go there.
Right. So, it's the most applied to, which makes it the most. And if you don't
go there, you settle for USC.
Yeah, because I'm not so sure USC has a, whether or not they have a cap is another story because USC, they operate on the money, obviously. But so, and again, these moves, when you have these big names that are the mainstays of the conferences, when these schools are going to jump ship, it's really crippling to those conferences that are having, that those names have supported them all these years. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma going out.
They were the Big 12.
Right. They were the Big 12. Now the Big 12 kind of made up for that by bringing in, some other big names, UCF.
But that's only going to balance them out in terms of like the overall competition.
Yeah, does it balance it out?
The reality is the reality is they will lose money, and they're not going to be on the same competitive level. That's just how it is.
No, because how are you going to, in marketing terms, and this is where it's really unfortunate. In marketing terms, how are you going to compete with the SEC? How are you going to compete with the Big Ten? I mean, I would not be surprised if even the the other one I think is the ACC or is it
the ACC? Yeah.
Is it the ACC?
Of the Power Five? Yeah, it's the ACC.
Yeah, because they're the ones that have Florida State, right? I think. And
yeah, they have Florida State.
I mean,
they have Notre Dame and everything except for football.
Right. Well, and can you imagine? That's probably what's going to happen. Is that probably I gotta imagine that the ACC is probably going to poach some programs next. That's a theory, but it could become a reality. I mean, it just the thing is that it's the East Coast that's got all the draw power, you know, Big Ten, SEC, ACC, you know, so it's really hard for the Pac-12 and the Big 12 to be competitive with those other three conferences.
Yeah, let's face it. The only names, not necessarily competitive, as I mentioned, but the only names in the Pac-12 are UCLA and USC, and now they're gone.
Now they're gone. So you know, and I'm sure that the Pac-12 will probably try to negotiate with some other teams, but it's like, who is there? Who is there that you can get? You know, I mean, I can see something like, you know, I remember that there was, you know, you would hear rumors about, oh, maybe the Oklahomas will go to the Pac-12 or something, and obviously that's not happening because
one Oklahoma is going to the SEC,
yeah.
The other Oklahoma is staying put in the Big 12.
Yeah, you know, this is really crippling to the Pac-12 because who are they going to get to replace those two schools? There's no one. There's no one that they can get to draw that. I mean,
well, let's also remember the fact that well, something that to me has just been shocking throughout all of this is that it was kept silent. We knew it was being telegraphed. We knew Texas and Oklahoma were going to move before they even applied. There were talks. It was all over the administration. It was all over the news. We knew it was going to happen before it even was officially announced, before they've submitted their applications, before they were accepted. We didn't hear about this until it was official.
Yeah.
We did not hear about this until the news was said they have applied and they've been accepted. So to me, it's just mind-blowing that they were able to keep it silent.
Yeah, this was quite something. So, I mean, who would they get? I mean, what? UNLV? Hawaii? I mean, who?
Maybe
who
San Diego State.
Who?
Maybe San Diego State.
Maybe. Again, this is, you know, yeah. Which, you know,
the ramifications of this, it's like, this is just so crippling. The Pac-12 is not going to get, they're not going to make the money.
They're not going to recover from this.
This blow, I think that's just, in terms of money, it's not happening. They're not going to make the kind of money.
Yeah, they have no negotiating power now with the networks. And that's, again, that's where I'm really,
that's what this was all about. I mean, because the rights were coming up. All the major contracts were coming up. That's what this was all about. As we discussed, this is all about money. UCLA and USC are going to get twice as much as members of the Big Ten than they would as members of the Big 12 of the Pac-12.
Which is why it's really unfortunate that it's come down to this, that it's all about you know, the money now. You know, that and so, you know, now the Big Ten will continue to have the divisions and stuff, and I gotta imagine that they'll probably stay in the Western Division. I can't imagine that they would realign.
I thought that they were going to get rid of. I thought that all the major conferences were going to get rid of divisions because of the NCAA rule changes.
Oh, I haven't paid much attention to that, but
the NCAA got rid of the rule that would require essentially divisions in order to justify having a championship game.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So there's
probably because they don't want Alabama losing in the conference title game. That's what they don't. They don't want that because they don't want Alabama missing out on the playoff. Or Ohio
That
State.
could still happen.
Or Ohio State missing out on the playoffs, because you know that those two schools are the big draws. And again, this is now going to get SC into the playoffs, because they definitely want SC in the playoffs. I'm sure SC strategically was looking at this and like, you know what? If we're in the Big Ten, we have a much better chance of getting into the playoffs versus being in the Pac-12. So
I don't know, because you look at the competitive schools in the Big Ten. I mean, they're all pretty competitive as well.
yeah. So anyway, so let's dive a little bit into, okay, so how does this affect wrestling as far as that's concerned? Now, Matthew, as you know, the Big Ten, I believe, is the only conference that all their current members sponsor wrestling. So UCLA and USC do not sponsor wrestling as a competitive NCAA D1 sport. They do both have club wrestling available, so that means that they would compete in the NCAA. But as far as, you know, actual D1 competition is concerned, they do not. So could that mean that wrestling could be returning to these two schools?
Well, I think it has to, because as I recall, the reason why all the Big Ten schools have wrestling is because it's one of the core schools it's one of the core sports that's required in their membership. That's my understanding, is that each course, each school for the core sports, they have to have wrestling. You look at some of the other, and you look at a bunch of the other sports, a bunch of the other sports have, full membership teams as well. Now, when you start to get into some of the other sports, like baseball, maybe some of the track sports, stuff like that, it's not as prevalent, or volleyball or whatever. But so I think what's gonna happen is with that amount of money, I think USC and UCLA, because they both have kind of a foundation with those club teams. So you and I both know that the overhead of wrestling, it's not that much.
Yeah.
So buying mats isn't that. It's like you're gonna get $60 million a year from the Big Ten. Buying mats, not that much. Paying for scholarships, not that much. In the long-term scheme of things, the cost of a wrestling program just isn't that much as a price for a membership into the Big Ten. So if they have to start programs in order to get into the Big Ten, they'll start programs to get into the Big Ten. Because it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested about that. If the Big Ten is going to really follow through, and I'm wondering if they negotiated that or not. So, but I saw an interesting name. He expressed some interest, and so Jordan Burroughs tweeted at USC and UCLA if they need a wrestling coach. So kind of
that kind of reinforces the whole thing that we've been talking about. It's a requirement of their membership. So, and yeah, Burroughs knows that he's only got so long. So,
right, because he's going to try and compete for 2024, which means that he'll try and challenge Kyle Dake. And I'm very sure if he, that means that he's going to have to cut down to 74 kilos, which, that's going to be quite a drain, to get down there. And I'm certain that 2024 happens and that's it. Whether he wins or loses to get onto the Olympic team, I'm very sure 2024 is, and he could have other thoughts, he could try to continue, but, I got to think that if he doesn't get in there, it's it is what it is. But, I think that'd be quite something, if he were to become coach of one of those teams, I'm very sure that they, if
he becomes coach, people are gonna go there just because of the fact that he is the coach. Obviously, we've seen it all over the place. It takes a while to establish a wrestling program, but he goes there, he's gonna have a lot more recruiting power than any other coach.
Yeah, and imagine if you can, imagine the SoCal wrestlers and probably even the Central Valley wrestlers that would want to go and be able to train with Burroughs. I mean, if definitely if he were to get in there, I mean, I'd be all for that.
Yeah, like one example it's point out is, John Smith took over the Oklahoma State wrestling team shortly after he won his
gold medals.
His gold medal and at the Barcelona games. So he just transitioned from an active wrestler to a wrestling coach, and then he won his first NCAA championship after that. So it makes perfect sense. 2024 is when the transition happens. So he goes out there, he wrestles, and when whether he qualifies or not, he goes out there and he does what he does, and then it's like after that, he's got a job waiting for him in retirement.
I mean, that would, it would be a bittersweet thing, the fact that these two schools leaving the Pac-12, if that's what resurrects wrestling at these schools, I mean,
so be it.
Well,
resurrected it at UCLA. I don't think USC ever had a wrestling team.
I think they did. It just wasn't that good.
Okay. Well, yeah, because in our father, who was a UCLA alumni, back when he went there, they actually had an NCAA champion, and then and then the program got cut like a year later.
Yeah.
But I do. Well, something else. Obviously, the big worry is Title IX, because in the name of Title IX is why we have basically half the wrestling programs that we did pre-Title IX. But the one big advantage we have now is women's wrestling.
So we could see women's wrestling being brought up at these two schools too. Maybe if somehow there's a condition worked out for that, you get.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's like they use essentially the same. It's like most wrestling programs, if they have men and women's wrestling at the same school, they all basically use the same equipment, facilities.
Right.
Everything. So there's not going to be a problem. You just you buy the wrestling mats and you got a program.
All right. Well, so chaos incoming, and we'll be talking about this in future episodes for sure, because we're curious. Is the Big Ten actually going to follow through with the requirements it's had for all its programs so far? Does that mean that wrestling will be resurrected at UCLA and USC? So
if they do enforce it, I'm pretty sure UCLA and USC had to read the charters, had to read the membership. They knew what they were getting into when they were signing up. So I'm pretty sure and like I said, they're getting twice as much money being members of the Big Ten than they are as with the Pac-12. So if that means that they have to buy everything that they need to in order to start a wrestling program, they're going to do it, because they're still making money in the end.
All right. So, Matthew, we'll just a quick closeout of Sumo is coming up next week. It's going to start next week. So just seeing how things are going. And one thing that I have to mention is that so you got your Hayas, the stables, and they obviously do Keiko, which is training, and so I think you and I had the opportunity to go watch actually a couple pro sumo Keiko sessions that they offered. They would have in local areas. And then obviously, you and I would go, and we'd go to the kids wrestling clubs, Keiko sessions too. But one thing that they used to do pre-COVID was a thing called Dageiko, and that was you go to other, sumo wrestlers belong to a heya, and then this Dageiko is they go to other stables and they challenge other, wrestlers, from the different stables. Obviously, when COVID hit, they stopped doing that, and it seemed to affect the performances of a lot of wrestlers, especially ones that did not, especially these stables that did not have a lot of wrestlers, but they would have someone in the paid ranks, so it would affect them a lot. So they finally started allowing Dageiko again. Unfortunately, they found out that one wrestler, one of the stables, did have some COVID-19 infections. And that was just to kind of go over a bit about it was Takayasu, who was a former Ozeki, and his heya, he got infected first, and then they found out that some other wrestlers at his heya also got infected. So it looks like that his heya is going to have to sit the basho out. Usually what the Kyokai has been doing is that if there's been infections found, that the heya has to sit out. Now, normally, if you have to sit out a basho because of injury or because you're just not competing for some reason, you end up losing your rank, and it's equivalent to an 0-15 or a record in the paid ranks or an 0-7 record in the unsalaried ranks. But most of the time, in the event of a COVID, if you have to sit out the basho because of COVID, they've protected the ranks of said rikishi because it's not really anything that's their own fault or something. Although sometimes if there's a log jam, you might end up losing a rank or half a rank.
I guess it would depend on if you got a 8-7, just held on, or
right. So Takayasu did have kind of a poor performance in May, so he did fall a few rungs, but he's about mid Makuuchi, so he's probably not going to have to worry about losing rank as much. On the flip side, though, you've got all other rikishi that are. So again, this was the Inside Sport Japan reported this on the 28th that he had tested positive. So they said that participation in Nagoya was possible if he recovers, but then Kintamayama Moti, as he is known, did report that did a lot of keiko. All of his opponents tested negative, but it seems that at least reading from how everything is going, yes, the whole heya is going to be out, which is unfortunate. So, it really hits these guys hard when they have to, sit out basho and stuff, and, not being able to. On the flip side, though, former Ozeki Asanoyama, who was suspended for a whole year because he lied to the Kyokai about breaking NSK COVID protocols, will be back in the 4th division. He'll be competing in this basho. So it's be interesting to see how he does, whether he makes a quick climb back up the ranks. And they're wanting to see if he's going to regain his Ozeki rank. Should be interesting.
So they suspended him until he was behind the curtain.
Yes, basically. 6-hole basho behind the curtain. Because
have we talked about that terminology on the show before?
The suspension, or just
no behind the curtain.
Oh, I think we probably not, but yeah. So behind the curtain is actually what Makushita means, and that's the 3rd division. And basically, the salaried wrestlers are the ones in front of the curtain, while all the unsalaried wrestlers are behind the curtain, which is why you have that terminology. So anyway, it doesn't look like a lot of other wrestlers are affected though. And Teruno Fuji, he's still the dominant wrestler. The Ozeki are pretty crippled right now. 2 out of the 3 are Kadoban, meaning that they're in danger of losing their rank if they don't get winning records. And Matthew, I think it's just not many good wrestlers right now, and it's hard to get excited about sumo when you don't have a lot of when you don't have an over dominant Rikishi right now, right?
Yep.
I mean, when you've looked and seen, I think it's Hakuho was dominant because there was really no one else to challenge him.
Yeah, right? I mean, let's face it. If we've talked about it before, if Asa Shoryu had not retired early, he may not have had the run of dominance that he had, because he would have had this rival that he would have had to contend with. And then another example, if he were born however many decades early and had to contend with the Hanada era.
Well, yeah, and Akebono was dominant first, because he reached Yokozuna first. And then you had the Wakataka brothers, the Hanada brothers, get up. And, even Takanohana had even with the advantage he had where Fujishima and Futagoyama Beya merged. And so there were a lot of guys he had to, he didn't have to compete against, because half the Joijin, which is the upper half of Makuuchi, were his stablemates. So he was going, against Rikishi as far down as like M6 or something, which is how he was able to dominate. And a lot of people found that to be unfair. But even then, he had to compete with people like Akebono. He had to compete against like Musashi Maru. It was a lot of other up there people. Kaio, I remember, was one of them. And but the funny thing is, Matthew, I think Takanohana and Akebono probably had one of the fiercest competitions. They ended up being equal. Their record was I think like 18-18.
That's a rivalry.
Yeah. So one of the I would consider that to be one of the greatest Yokozuna rivalries in the history of the sport.
Yeah, so, but if we want to take one step further, like if Takanohana, take Akebono out of the picture. Like you said, Takanohana, half of his stablemates were the upper class people. He wouldn't have had to deal with all those. He wouldn't have had to deal with a man who basically he split even with.
One thing I do have to say, though, Takanohana would have gotten a lot farther had there was the one, his last U show that he won. And he got injured, I think, on day 13. I think it was day 13. It was either day 13 or 14. He had a very severe injury to his knee. And
it's not the same after that?
Yes. And he went out on the last day. He ended up losing to Musashi Maru. So they ended up both 13-2. So they went to a playoff. But Takanohana went out there and won the U show in the playoff, and it really was a huge thing in Japan because he came back from the injury, and just the look on his face that he had when he won it, and everyone was all inspired and stuff. And he even had Koizumi, who was the prime minister at the time. He showed up and presented the prime minister's companies, and he gave this riveting speech about how it was very moved by Takanohana and stuff. But then Takanohana, he had surgery on the knee, and he sat out for 7 basho, and he just was not the same after that. If he had just not, and see, the problem was that he decided to go out there and compete, and he aggravated the injury to the extent that he couldn't continue after that. And so that's how his career ended up getting cut short. If he had just taken the L at that point, I think he probably would have been able to come back from that. So, it is what it is. So anyway, to close it out, Sumo's coming up, so we'll be sure to talk about that and seeing how day one went for the next episode, and just a friendly just to kind of let everyone know, I do run some sumo games on sumoforum.net. Also, sumoforum.net does host a variety of other sumo games, which you go out and you make choices about how you think certain rikishi are going to do what. And so it's a really fun thing to do. And so I would just like to encourage everyone to kind of try out and do that. So I do run some sumo games myself. And so I will, when we upload this episode, we'll be making sure to include the links to the threads if you are interested in playing. So Matthew, thank you as always for your insightfulness. We had, again, like I said at the beginning, we had quite an action-packed episode this time around. A lot to have covered. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen going forward, especially with the, USC, UCLA exodus from Pac-12 going into the Big Ten, and then just to see what other wrestling news that we'll have coming up. So, Matthew, our normal social media, we added 2, and I'll make sure to let everyone know what the 2 that we've added are. But what are our normal social media that everyone can find us on?
Okay, our normal social media for our video podcast, it's YouTube and Rumble. For our audio podcast, it's Acast, Apple, Spotify, and Google. More platforms to be added.
So, and to add on to those platforms, so if for everyone who is interested now, we are officially on Twitter, so that if you want to follow us, and we do plan on reaching out to some people. We would like to definitely, what we're hoping is for future podcast episodes, we definitely want to interview some people in the community. If you're a wrestler, even a fighter, or if you coached wrestling, we would love to reach out and talk with you just about how things have been going, what inspired you to do what you're doing, and giving back to the community. So we're hoping that we can do that in the near future. And we also added a new video platform also on Odyssey. So make sure to go check us out on there too. And we'll be getting into a lot of stuff. So we're really excited about, the development of the future of this podcast. So make sure that you go and follow us on those platforms as well. And Matthew also, as we've mentioned several times throughout this podcast, Matthew is on Twitter personally, so you can follow him at Matthew Salzer. And then he also runs the website MMA Freak, which reports on MMA events and such. So you can also follow that website. They also have a Twitter at MMA Freakout. The website is mma-freak.com. So, Matthew, again, thank you.
Also recently reactivated my personal YouTube. It was never actually deactivated, but I recently started posting videos there again. So, that's Matthew Salzer too.
So anyway, so thank you to all for joining us as always. And we're now up to 10 plus subscribers now. So We'll eventually, you know, hopefully as we're growing the channel, you know, maybe we'll try and do some special stuff. So our next goal is to get to 50 subscribers. So make sure you hit the like button on this podcast, and also make sure that you are subscribing to our channel so that you can stay updated on our content that we're providing. So Matthew, with all that being said, next week we'll have to see how things are going with wrestling and MMA, and the first day of the Nagoya Basho for Sumo. So we'll be making sure to report on that too and discuss how things are going. So Matthew, as always, thank you for your time and your insightfulness into the variety of issues that we and events that we're covering. And to all our viewers and subscribers, happy 4th of July, and we will talk to you soon.